Good morning. I wanted to spend a few minutes with you talking about advocacy, for those of you who really haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. Advocacy is something we as museum professionals do every day. Even though we might not call it advocacy, it doesn't have to mean legislative advocacy. As you start to learn how to reach out to legislators, I want you to think about all the other ways you advocate for your site. Through marketing, talking to community groups, talking with your friends, and consider that legislative advocacy is just another prong of your approach to spreading the word about your site and what you do. A lot of nonprofit folks are a bit fearful of legislative advocacy because they aren't sure how much they can do. Most museums are 501c3, and one of the first things you learn is that you can't lobby. But what constitutes lobbying versus what advocacy encompasses? Before you feel comfortable becoming an advocate, you need to know the difference and what it is you can actually do. A good rule of thumb is to think of advocacy as education, while lobbying is influence. Sometimes it can seem like a fine line, but there are a lot of activities that a nonprofit can and should be doing to make themselves heard that do not at all endanger your nonprofit status. So take a look at these things on the screen. You'll notice on the right, specific shows up in each of these items. That's a good word to remember. Specific candidate, specific bill, specific policy. Those are things we want to stay away from. However, talking about how laws affect your museum, talking to legislators about how your museum helps the community, all of those things are important and completely appropriate. Now to the General Assembly. This can be an intimidating body if you haven't spent any time there. But just to give you a little bit of background, the General Assembly is the oldest lawmaking body in the New World, which most of you probably know since we're getting ready for the 2019 anniversary. The General Assembly is, like most state legislatures, a part-time body. The session starts in January, and if it's a budget year, it will go for 60 days. If it's not a budget year, they would meet for a short session of 45 days. There are 40 senators and 100 delegates representing Virginia, and senators are reelected every 4 years and delegates every 2 years, all at once. So you can see how sometimes we'll have a lot of new legislators, like this year, all at the same time. The session schedule can help you get comfortable with what the patterns of session are. You can download the schedule each session from the Legislative Assembly website, and that's virginiageneralassembly.gov. There are some key dates to keep in mind. The pre-filing deadline is when you're going to see most bills come in. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Once that pre-filing deadline happens, you can start looking at what bills have been introduced, what bills might affect you during the course of the session, what you might have to be paying attention to. The first day of session is also important. If there's been an election that year, that's when all of the new legislators will be introduced and inaugurated, so to speak, and assigned to committees, and the work really starts. Crossover is what's happening in the middle of February in 2018, and it's an important day. What happens the first half of session is that A bill that's introduced in the House is discussed within House committees and on the House floor, and the same for the Senate. If the Senate introduced the bill, they will talk about it. Crossover means anything the House wants the Senate to look at, they hand over, and vice versa. And the House can no longer look at those bills, only the Senate can now look at them. So if your bill has made it through crossover, it has a better chance. If it hasn't made it through crossover, meaning the House didn't send it on to the Senate to review, it's not going to happen during this session. We've talked so far about the General Assembly and about state-level advocacy. The remaining parts of this webinar can apply just as easily to your congressional representatives and senators, so please don't leave them out when you think about the following suggestions for getting involved. First, who are your representatives? The General Assembly and the Congress have a simple tool that will show you who your state level reps are and your federal reps. And each legislator also has a website with more information about what they're interested in, what committees they sit on. As you get more involved, this is really important information. Second, what are other museums doing? Look at your other local museums. Have they invited a legislator to come watch one of their programs or come to an event? Have they gone to visit a legislator? Ask them how it went, how they did, and learn from what they did. Do you know a museum who crafted an impact statement? Use that as an example to take to your board to create the same thing for yourself. And step 3 here, make sure to visit the VAM and the American Alliance of Museum websites to see what these organizations are doing. We both have infographics and resources and statistics you can use to help talk about how important museums are, or that you can adapt to a local infographic or impact statement. Okay, now your homework is done. You've done your research. You know who your legislator is, what they're interested in, and what the bigger picture is. Now you start advocating for your museum. The main thing to remember is that you want to be able to tell a story about your site and its impact when you talk to legislators. Numbers and statistics are great and are necessary, but storytelling is what people remember and it's what makes you stand out from the crowd. So reach out to your audience. Try and find those stories that will illustrate the statistics that you've gathered so that you can really make your impact known. Now you're ready to reach out to your legislator. You have your research, you have your statistics, your impact statement, and your stories. There are lots of different ways to engage with your legislator and to reach out to them. You friend them on Facebook so that you can follow what they're talking about and what they're interested in. You could invite them to your site for an event. You could request a meeting at their home office when they're out of session. Not many people think about doing this, but it's actually a better time to reach out to them because they're less busy and less chaotic. You could also visit them at their office during session. If you're wondering how a meeting should go or how to prepare for a meeting, the VAM website does have tips for advocacy. If you go there, you'll find how to prepare for a meeting, what to take with you, how to handle during the meeting, and then how to follow up to make sure that you continue the relationship beyond that one meeting. The next step is to reach out to your audience. There are lots of ways to share information about issues affecting your museum and how important your museum is in your community. Many of them you already do in general marketing efforts. But think about adding an advocacy component to those messages. Make sure the public knows what they need in order to support you and speak up for you. AAM has a great page of resources on spreading the word about advocacy, and they divide everything by how much time you have to spend. So, for instance, if you have 10 minutes, you might try this method. If you have 2 hours, you might try recording this. Take a look at the advocacy page on AAM's website under Publicity Tools to walk through that process. Okay, now I'm going to make a pitch for your next step. Now you know the basics of advocacy. Hopefully it's a little less intimidating. The General Assembly is just another building, and you know how it works now. And hopefully you'll be more comfortable getting engaged. There are lots of ways to do this that we've already talked about. But once you're comfortable advocating from your office or from your local community, the next step is to join us as a group to advocate as a whole. VAM has an advocacy day every year, and AAM has an advocacy day on Capitol Hill every year. Take a chance and join us on one of those. There are sometimes trainings that go along with it, and it'll give you a chance to be a part of the bigger picture. I hope this has been a helpful introduction to advocacy for your museum, and that you feel more empowered to speak up about the impact of museums in the community. If you have any questions about advocacy, please do not hesitate to contact me or visit our website.